This video is sponsored by iFixit. I hate seeing the fancy special edition PS4s go to waste, so when I saw these two Broken Spider-Man special editions for sale on eBay, I decided I had to buy them to see if I could fix them. Let's do this. So for PS4 Pro number 1, I paid $209. For number 2, I paid $260. This one, when I unboxed it, it had the power cable connector from the motherboard right on top of the PS4, so it's obviously been torn off, but the real question is there anything else wrong other than this connector? And also, did they try and fix it themselves, and if so, did they do any damage? PS4 Pro number 2 smells like cockroaches, which is disgusting. This was not disclosed in the auction, but you know how eBay is. That's what you get sometimes. So this one probably just needs a power supply, but at the same time, it's gonna be disgusting inside, so I gotta open that up and see what exactly it looks like and if we can clean it and bring it back to usable condition. So I'm gonna start with number 1. Obviously, we need to address this connector from the motherboard, so I gotta get it torn down and see what exactly is going on in there. Also, I bought this special edition Spider-Man PS4 controller from eBay again, and it is also broken, but I have a special video just for this that I think you're gonna like, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. So let's get number 1 torn down and see what we find. Okay, it has been cleaned, that's for sure. It doesn't smell too gross, so I am hopeful that this one doesn't have cockroaches, but you never know. They've definitely had this one open. Instead of removing the screw, they just tore that whole tab off. Oh, this is not good news. This looks like liquid damage. We got the disk drive ribbon cable disconnected. Well, this just got more interesting. So the liquid bit would have been right here, but I can also see a little bit on this motherboard already, so hopefully it's not too bad. Let's get it tore down the rest of the way. I'm gonna be using an iFixit ProTech toolkit. This is one of my favorite toolkits as it doesn't have a ton of stuff that you don't need, but it also has everything that you do need. So I'll be using this driver kit to remove all the screws out of this PS4. Let's first remove the hard drive and see if that's been damaged from the liquid. And not too bad. They may have replaced this one already, but this one, as far as I can tell, looks just fine. Now, I do want to point out this clamp is also installed upside down. This little dot is supposed to go down, not facing up, which is also why it didn't fit on here correctly. You can see that this part of the clamp went over that memory chip. It is supposed to go on like that. It's also missing one thermal pad right there. And I also see some problems right over here. Somebody's definitely tried to do some stuff over here, so we'll take a look at that once we get this motherboard out. It looks like this is probably right where that connector goes on the other side of the motherboard. So here we go. Let's look for any liquid damage. I actually don't see any. Okay, so that's good news. This might be salvageable. So we might actually be able to fix this one. That's great news. So let's address the first and most important issue so far that I see, and that would be this. So this is the piece that was taped to the top of this console. So these 4 pins need to be attached to 4 of these pins right here on the motherboard. Unfortunately, these ones have just been totally torn off and destroyed. So I got to get under the microscope and see how we're gonna be able to fix this problem. So this is our problem. This needs to be connected to these circuit traces right here. Unfortunately, these actually have been torn off. All this stuff you see over here, that's what's left of the circuit where it would normally connect to these 4 pins. In addition, there's also what looks like probably super glue on this motherboard. Unfortunately, there's some people that think just gluing one of these back on will fix the problem, when that won't fix it because it needs to be attached with some sort of conducting material to the circuits on the motherboard. So in this case, the conducting material is solder. So I'm just gonna work on getting some of this off, then I will heat it up if necessary. That should help get more of it off, and hopefully we can get enough of it off to actually rebuild this portion of the motherboard. So this part right here, I have to be super careful getting that glue or whatever it is off, because there is still some of the circuit traces from the motherboard kind of all rolled up in all of this. So if I can unroll that without breaking anything, I actually might be able to reuse some of these. So I'm hoping that maybe I can get this off gently enough to not break those circuits off of the motherboard. Well, that one just flew off my workbench, so who knows if I'll ever be able to find that, but I don't think I actually need it. Got one connection here, one connection here, one connection over here somewhere, and one connection over here. So the other problem we have is these are the mounting tabs, one over here and one over here. That's going to be pretty difficult to rebuild any sort of secure mounting base for this connector. But once we get it on here, we'll see if we can do anything about that. So now I've got this area completely cleaned off. I'm gonna need to connect all of these traces along with this one all the way over to the power supply connector that I'm gonna be putting on. Also, I need to make sure these are all connected. And then I need to connect a wire from here and here all the way up to the connector where the power supply plugs in. So this connector goes on here like this. These are actually bent, so I can't quite show you how it goes, but it needs to sit on here like this. So I need to run a wire from here all the way up to here for each of these pins. So let me show you what it looks like on a good motherboard. Here's a good motherboard. This is what it should look like. And you can see that this is all one piece all the way from here, all the way up to here. Same with this one and this one and this one. So I need to rebuild this circuit from this point all the way up to this point. And then the connector can be put on like this. Now first I need to rebend these pins on this connector. I'm actually gonna do that with my thumbnail, hopefully. There's one, looks good. There's another one. Another one, and the last one. So that is all now ready to install. Now this right here is the mounting point for this connector. Once I get this installed, I'll see if there's any way that I can correct this problem and make it so it will mount to the motherboard. I'm not so sure that it will, just because there's so much damage on the motherboard, but I will try to do it. And hopefully we can get it at least a little bit connected, because that makes everything easier when this can mount correctly down on the motherboard. So this is how it will sit once I have it fully installed. And it looks like there might be enough over on this side, maybe even this side, to get enough of the motherboard scraped away so I can connect this mounting pin with solder. So now I'm going to rebuild this part of the circuit. I'm going to add some wire from here all the way up to here. And to do that, I'm going to be using this wiring pen. Out of the end of the wiring pen, there is enameled wire, so that just means there's a coating on it. So I'm going to connect this wire with all of these traces right here, and then it will end up over here, and then I can connect the power supply connector to that wire. This wiring pencil is available on my website, TronicsFixStore.com. If you want to buy one of these for yourself, you can also just use a roll of enameled wire, but a wiring pencil just makes this so much easier. Now that we have our new circuits put in, I'm gonna put some green goo over this, and that will just protect all of these circuits and make sure they don't come into contact with each other or anything else. So I'm gonna use the green goo, it's called solder mask, and then I'm gonna use a UV curing light to dry that out and make it hard, then we'll install the connector. So we did end up getting one really good solid mounting point. This one is not that solid, but it's enough to at least keep it mostly secure. We've got each of these circuit traces connected to the correct circuit, and now it's time to clean it up and then put it back into the PS4 Pro and see if it works. And of course we need to add the perfect amount of thermal paste. There we go. So here is the rebuilt connector and circuit traces on our motherboard. You can see that it is in there nice and sturdy. Not as sturdy as it could be, but plenty sturdy enough for us to get the connector on there. So now I'm going to install this power supply, then we'll plug it in and see if it's going to work for us. There we go. Plugs in just fine. Now I have the power supply installed. Now I'm going to plug it in and see if it works. One thing we need to keep in mind is we don't know why the seller took this apart. So there could be other issues, and maybe the reason they took it apart was the disk drive didn't work or some other problem. So even if we do have the power supply problem fixed, that doesn't mean that it's fixed. I definitely hope it is, but I won't know until we get it started up. Let's plug it in and see what it does. Okay, no smoke or anything so far. Okay, do we have power? Yes, good. Come on. Yes, we've got the PlayStation logo. That's good news. Let's see if it starts up all the way. Okay, so this looks great so far. I'm gonna put a disc in and let's see if it will play a disc. Okay, but it is reading it. It can recognize there's not enough free space on the hard drive. So that's good news. That means that the disk drive works. It does work a little sluggish, so I'm gonna try it a few more times. I might need to take that apart and clean it up and get that working better. But overall, I think the main problem with PS4 number 1 is fixed. Now let's move on to PS4 number 2. So for PS4 Pro number 2, this one was the $260 PS4 Pro. This is the one that smells disgusting. And since there's roaches in it, I can already tell you it most likely just needs a new power supply. But let's open it up and see if there's anything else wrong. And now is when we find out how bad the infestation is. And I've seen a lot worse. That's actually not too bad. So next we gotta get down to the power supply. Then we can put a new one in and see if that fixes it. Now for disconnecting the power supply, we need to pull on this part of it, not this part down here that's connected to the motherboard. If you pull on the part that's connected to the motherboard, then that part will just tear off and you'll have a repair just like I did on the first PS4 Pro. So if you don't want to do that repair, you need to make sure and pull on this part, not that part. So before we get this power supply replaced, let's open this one up and see exactly what went wrong. So this is the inside of the top cover, and that is pretty nasty. But let's look at how the cockroaches destroyed this power supply. Before we do that, I have to say, if you're trying to fix something like this yourself, don't touch the power supply or even take it apart, just because there is some very high voltage, specifically in capacitors like this, that can cause serious damage to yourself. So I never recommend opening it. If you are gonna open it, make sure that all the capacitors are discharged. But again, I recommend you don't try this at home. So we'll likely be able to see what went wrong with this power supply on the underside of it. And the first thing we see right here is a disgusting cockroach, and also a place where it looks like the cockroach exploded. And this right here shows exactly what happened. So most likely the happy little cockroach was walking along through this power supply and touched two of the points here that they shouldn't have touched, which likely put current right through the cockroach's body, but also shorted out the circuit. So this power supply has all these components burned out. In many cases, these are repairable. This one very well might be fixable, but I'll leave that for another video. I'm just gonna go ahead and replace this one with another power supply, and we'll see if that gets this PS4 working. Now, before we get this power supply installed, I do want to give this a bit of a cleaning. You can see the fan is a little bit dirty. Definitely seen a lot worse, but might as well clean it while we're in here. So this is the power supply out of the PS4 Death Stranding edition that I fixed in an earlier video. If you haven't seen that, I recommend you go back and check that out, as that is a fairly interesting fix as well. I'll put a link to that up on your screen at the end. But that's where this power supply came from. Now I have it back together enough to test it, so I'm gonna get it plugged in and let's see if it turns on and if it plays a disc and if we find anything else wrong. Does it have power? Oh no. Oh, it does have power. And it even has a disc inside. So this has NBA 2K19. Not an expensive game, but hey, it's still a free game. Okay, there we go, checking system storage status. That's totally normal, so I'm gonna let this get all set up and then we'll test the disk drive. Now it's all set up, we're at the dashboard. Let's see if it's gonna play this disk. And there we go. So this one looks like it's completely fixed. Let me show you how much these are going for. So I only see one right now that's just the console only. This one sold for $300 plus $25 shipping. I paid $209 for one and $260 for the other. I also did put a power supply in, which is worth anywhere from $50 to $70. So if I sold both of these consoles, I would definitely make a little bit of profit on these. I don't know how much because there's only one sold that is comparable. Also, one of them has been infested with roaches, which I would mention in the listing, and that would also bring the price down a little bit. But overall, this actually was a pretty good buy. Even though I wasn't buying to make a profit, I was just buying to show some interesting repairs. I still would be able to pull out some profit on this buy. Thank you again to iFixit for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to receive $10 off your order of $50 or more, just go to ifixit.com/TronicsFix. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one.